Thank you all for coming. I'm Maxine Minkoff, the president of the Orleans Citizens Forum. And before I introduce tonight's panel and moderators, I want to thank you for being here in person and virtually, and for your generous contributions through your Citizens Forum membership and donations. These allow us to provide you with programs that we believe matter to all residents. We're pleased to welcome our panelists. Town Manager Kim Newman. Here. There you are. Select Board Chair Michael Herman. And Finance Committee Member Constance Kramer. Also with us are two very distinguished moderators, journalists Martha Sherrill and Emily Miller, who are the researchers and writers of the Orleans newsletter Exit 89, as well as two of its co-founders. We're deviating tonight from our usual format and from our original plans. We're dedicating the entire meeting to the warrant articles that will be voted on at town meeting on October 16th. There'll be opportunities for questions and answers from the audience and the panelists throughout the session. Martha and Emily will explain how the session is organized. But I'm sure you're going to find it interesting and informative and helpful in thinking about how you're going to vote on October 16th. So without further delay, I'll turn the forum over to Martha and Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Maxine. We are happy to be here tonight with you. Just to give you a quick piece of context, Exit 89 is a hyperlocal online newsletter, and what we do is we try and explain and clarify town issues for people before town meetings, and we do some deep dives throughout the course of the year on what's going on in town. So we are very happy to be here. And I'm just going to tell you, we do have these little fancy brand new postcards if you're interested to pick up at the end. There's also a handout about tonight's format right on the table. And I'll just quickly explain how we're going to run this show. So we basically went through the warrant and divided it into what we thought are 4 buckets. And they're sort of subject areas. We're not covering every warrant article. But we tried to pick out some that seem especially meaningful and that people might have questions about. We are going to briefly discuss the article and then ask a panelist to explain more, clarify, discuss, and they will answer. And then at a given point, we will ask for questions from the audience. For certain things in the article and other times, it'll be after the whole bucket. And we'll definitely let you know. We will make it clear. We're going to try and stick to the articles that are being discussed by the panel, and then at the end we're going to open it up to anything that we didn't get to. So does that sound all right? Yes. All right. Wonderful. Well, without further ado, I will hand it over to Martha, who is covering the first bucket, which is town hall staffing, reorganization, and succession planning.
Hello. Okay, so the first topic we're going to discuss is staffing, reorganization, succession planning, all of which are described in 4 articles in the warrant, 11, 12, 13, and 14. These 4 articles ask for funding to make what seem like modernizing changes at Town Hall, including reorganization and succession planning. They would also add some staff, a full-time human resources director, as well as beefing up the recreation department with a full-time assistant recreation director and I think a half-time grocer. Do I get that backwards? No, okay. There's a 1.5-time new slot being added to the rec department. We already have a slot for a full-time rec director. So I have questions for each of the 3 panelists, but I'd like to start with Kim Newman, our new town manager, and say hello and welcome to Orleans.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Kim, could you please explain the need for these changes and how you imagine
them making a difference to the operations of town.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Oh, am I not using the microphone? Is that better? I just want to thank Exit 89 for doing that lovely piece on me when I first got here about my dogs and my kids because they rolled their eyes at me tremendously. And I said, "This is what I told you would happen. People would be interested in your life." So, in terms of staffing in the town, I think most people know in this day and age that human resources is obviously a critical function to any organization. And the town has been without an HR office for its entirety. We do have a person that has been doing the HR functions within the manager's office, but only as part of their job. And what has happened over the years is that it's actually become almost 90% of the job, because if you can imagine how many people that we hire seasonally, particularly for the beach it's just an outrageous amount of processing that's occurring in terms of HR. So it was even through my interview process coming on board here, I was really shocked to learn that the town had never actually had that specific position. And then I'm sure you also know that the legalities and the complications related to hiring and all of the things that have gone with it over the years, and certainly now in a post-pandemic world, it's critical for the town in order to avoid future liabilities to really invest in a professional in that position. And so feel really confident in recommending that at this point because it seems like something the town will really get a lot of value from.
Thank you. Constance, the Finance Committee voted unanimously to support these 4 articles. Can you tell us why?
Martha. Well, if you've been following the banter of the Finance Committee over the last several years, before I was ever on it, and recently, our idea for town were all about a strategic plan and a vision, and succession hiring and planning was always a big priority and a focus. It was the best way to be fiscally responsible and to understand really what the needs of the town were. And we are thrilled to see him kind of take that. And you can see that in the letter in our May town meeting, the Finance Committee's letter. Those were thoughtfully put together.
For those of us who don't really know what succession planning means,
Because that's can anyone want to take that one?
I'll take it because there's 4 articles and I really only spoke to one of them. And so because I really want to talk about recreation too as something that we need to highlight, but succession planning is having a person training in the position behind the department head so that you don't have any gaps in support and critical services to your community. One of the issues we're having now is that you've had many communities are having this very same issue is you have long-term excellent employees in key roles in your organization who've been there for a very long time and they're a wealth of knowledge. Placing those positions is very difficult. And so we need to be really strategic and forward thinking about how we attract the talent to fill those roles and preferably to do it before we're under a deadline to do so. And so we've really the board has made it a priority in bringing me in and sort of as one of their goals to really focus on that in all of our departments so that, we're set up for success for the next 10, 15 years. I mean, this market is getting increasingly more competitive to really find talent. And the truth of it is many municipalities are having to find people from private industry and bring them over into a municipal world because it's not a career that a lot of people found their way into, but not everyone thinks of initially when they go out into the working world. And so we've really had to start being creative about matching skill sets to positions, and that takes a little bit longer. People need to be trained a little bit more. So it's simple as just filling more. And so we really need to be thinking about that. So I want to just talk about recreation. I just don't want to leave that one because there's 4, and recreation is another key one that was already underway before I even arrived. Well, I'm like so close to my face. Recreation I think most of the community was already involved in a conversation before I arrived about what was the state of recreation and where it was going. And I really think that the town deserves to have a great functioning recreation department that serves
Everyone within the community. It was a part-time position for a while that was increased to full-time, and then we had some trouble filling that role, right? It's back to succession planning. This proposal in this article is about funding one more full-time position that will either be
assistant recreation director
Okay.
or program manager. And the reason that it's either or is because of what I just talked about in terms of finding talent. We really don't, we can put an ideal out for a position that we want that's assistant director, but we might not get candidates that are at that level. And so we need flexibility in order to really make decisions based upon the candidates that we get. And so Article 14, which is
kind of just a boring clerical article, but you have a personnel bylaw that basically says that any time a position title because it's really just a processing. But what I've done in that article is just add a bunch of titles that we might consider in the future based upon hiring needs that we might have at the time. It does not mean that a position has been created and filled. It just gives us the possibility to be a little bit more flexible when we're hiring, and that's what that does. But recreation is a position and a half.
Okay.
One full-time position, and then 10 more hours for an administrative position. So you're
week and they have accepted. And so we are finishing the,
Oh, boy.
and if all
Great.
goes as planned, they will start November 15th. And then we will have a full-time either assistant director or program manager, and then a part-time admin in the department.
Great. Thank you. Michael, so select board conversation about this article. Was there much debate, pushback, hesitation?
Absolutely not. I think Kim and Constance explained it very well. I don't have much to add to it, but this has been select board has been discussing this for years now. We really want to make sure we are fiscally responsible in setting up our town for the future. I think we see succession in all capacities of both business and municipalities. One of our examples, of course, is secession is right here. I mean, we're starting at the top and we're making sure we're looking at our select board goal of support town manager to develop an effective succession plan for town staff over the next 5 years. So we're really looking, and I think Kim made a great point. We have amazing staff. We have an amazing pool of talent that works in this town, but we need to make sure there's a lot of people that have indicated to us as our senior staff that maybe retiring in the next few years, in 5 years. And it is not easy out there in the job market to find qualified staff, and we want the best staff for our town. So it's going to take some time, and what we're trying to do is set ourselves up for success. And that's really this.
So the article that asked for the money for reorganization and succession planning, is that a one-time expense for sort of consulting and help, or is that an ongoing?
Yes. So that article is actually meant to do a couple of different things. It's one-time funding related to looking at some critical areas that we're talking
about to help us determine how we're going to best move forward. So either through regionalization or through incentivizing for hiring, or it's not just hiring, it's also looking at our warrant process and our bylaws and how they might hinder our hiring process, like I just said about having an article just for titles. You know, we have a lot of sort of re-examination of existing documents, and we obviously want to have, you know, subject matter experts related to those things in order to help us determine what our processes should be. And so, you know, the warrant is another one, and we have a model that we've used for a very long time.
Is this the most effective way in which we are communicating things for the community? I don't know, but we should take a look at that, right? And so that article will put money aside that's dedicated specifically for that, and will also give us the legal assistance we need as we craft these things, because that's one area that I really feel like the town needs to spend a little bit more time thinking about, which is when it makes decisions, what are the actual
long-term implications related to those things around bylaws or anything else that we do.
Right. Thank you. That's great. So we're looking for questions from the audience. Anyone have questions for any of the panelists, or do the panelists have questions for each other? You're going to be handed a microphone.
Microphone. I love it. It's kind of a three-part question
Mhm.
about the reorganization. Do you truly intend to look freshly from the top down with no preconceived notions? And that's part one. Will we be considering an environmental or water quality position as a department head, since we've all agreed that the environment and biodiversity and all these issues are right at the top of our page? And most importantly, what will be the public's input to this process with the consultant?
So, yeah, for the first question about whether we're looking truly externally, the answer is yes, 100%. So I'll give you the latest. We just did a recruitment for the recreation director, and that was a national search that we did, and they included, advertising in the National Recreation Parks and Recreation Professional Association, and we were able to actually hire someone who is coming from that organization who is going to move into the community to work here. We also consider internal candidates if they're qualified. My expectations around, I've managed a lot of different staffs over time. You absolutely want to train and promote, and to the extent that you can within the organization, within limits. I think anyone who has managed a business understands that part of it. And so I always look in that way. There's, I, I hire as fairly as I possibly can in any situation, right? To my own detriment, right? Sometimes, but you want to have something, you want your process to be solid, right? I use a panel, we use a score method, we use things that they haven't used before, right? They're a little bit more stringent than I think they've been used in hiring in the past. So hopefully that's going to create an applicant pool that's, brings candidates that are very competitive. The environmental position,
We have a position on one of the warrant articles right now, which is Energy and Sustainability Manager. I have it listed on here as one-time funding related to the position, because what actually is happening with it is there's a potential to be in a regional agreement with multiple communities about, this exact need. This is such a critical need for so many communities. And what hasn't been determined at this point is how much, basically, what slice of the pie we would get for a position, what that means in terms financially to us long term. So in order to be able to participate in a process that we could be in a regional agreement, we have to put money aside in order to
fund a portion of it, and that's what that is. Personally, one of the areas that I'm looking at within my reorganization, within my own office, is about climate and resiliency, and recognizing that the economy here is tied implicitly to the environment, and I think that's something we need to be focusing on moving forward. So I can tell you, yes, in addition to this sustainability piece, it's key on my list of areas that are circled that need to be looked at soon. And what was the third part? Public. So we have a personnel advisory board right now in terms of reclassification of existing positions, but all of the other things, the bylaw pieces, the warrant process, these are panel created conversations, without committing people who aren't in the room, but like in terms of the warrant or things like that, I see that as a panel of our, local moderators participating in order to basically help advise us, right? And so the public participation in that is strong. None of this is decided. Like anyone, and most of you at this point, I think, have been in a room with me already. I'm incredibly collaborative by nature, and so this is not going to be an administration that makes decisions behind a door. That doesn't happen, and so I'm working at the behest of the community. So, the more involvement, the better. So. Mm.
Well,
If I may add
yeah.
to that, yeah, from the top down, Betsy, we're definitely, I think our example of is working with Kim. Apologize. From the top down, we've really started with our town manager, and we are looking at all of our senior positions, as I mentioned earlier. So the reorganization is one of our select board goals, and looking at it, just addressing it. If things are working the way they are with we're leaving that alone, but we are making sure we're addressing all of that. I hope we're starting with the idea of a part-time regional person, but that may be easily expanded to full-time. I agree with you. I do believe we need somebody full-time, but we've got nothing now. I really want to get something started, and that's what we're trying to do at this town meeting is to get something started, work with other communities. We all around us and our neighbors to the south and to the northwest. Um, a lot of us are facing the same challenges. So it would be really behoove us to, as a community, it gets a lot more attention at, say, the state level or the regional level if we can be collaborative with our other towns. So, um,
Any other questions? Nope. That's it. Okay, great. Thank you, panelists. That was, I feel, very informative. Few issues. Um, and just two articles, 3 and 4. Article 3 is one of the biggest ticket items on the warrant, aside from the budget itself. 8 new positions at Fire and Rescue, totaling nearly 1.2 million. Article 4 asks for another $500,000 for a new aerial ladder truck. In addition to, it's you probably know this, we approved a $1.6 million truck, and the price went up in a matter of just a few months. So this is going to be to Kim or Michael. Explain the need for the 8 more firefighters on staff at Fire and Rescue.
Either or, you can start.
Okay, I'll be happy to start. This is something the select board has been working with our fire department on staffing analysis for quite a while. I think we all know how heroic our firefighters have been in emergency services during the pandemic. We are in a situation of town where they are in heavy demand. They are constantly on the road, out on calls. Through the analysis with the chief, we've determined and support that we definitely need to increase our staffing. And what it's come to is 8 firefighters need to be hired to keep us actively. There any questions on that?
Anybody to add?
No, I was gonna wait for the question.
Okay. So uh, I was thinking about the aerial ladder truck, was it's interesting, this considerable increase from just last May when the truck was approved for 1.6 million, and now another $500,000 is needed. That's really after the fact sticker shock. So what happened? Is that a supply chain problem? And is there a way to anticipate problems like this? I mean, is this sort of thing going to continue where we buy something and then we find out by the time we write the check that it's actually doubled in price? Is there any way to anticipate that and deal with it? Is it a problem? Either Kim or Michael?
I'll take this one.
Okay, thank
Even though
you.
I wasn't here in May.
Yeah.
So it's safer for me to take this one. So oftentimes on projects like this, particularly $1 million pieces of equipment that a town buys, part of you're agreeing to a price. What you're really asking for at town meeting is authorization to borrow up to a certain amount. What happened in May was that you got authorization to borrow up to 1.6 for the truck, even though the truck was going to be more, right? But the rest of that piece was going to be offset by the cost of the trade-in of the existing truck. And the trade-in value of the truck is substantially less than what was anticipated. And so this is actually authorization to borrow up to the amount needed for the truck. And so you answer, yes, it happens all the time, unfortunately, when you're buying pieces of equipment. And the the other part that people should understand is these prices of it is astronomical how fast the price costs and how far out you have to basically put your purchase order in ahead of time to get in the queue to get your equipment. I don't want to put the chief on the spot, but how far out? How long would it take for us to actually get this piece of equipment here? Right. So, and if you imagine, if you borrow, you basically get authorization to borrow now to lock in the price now so that you don't have to pay the 3 years from now cost. That's what's happening here.
Okay, great. And assuming this goes forward and passes, when would the new staff in the fire and rescue be brought in, and would they be set up by spring or summer, or do we
Yesterday.
Yeah.
yesterday?
Immediate.
You've already hired them.
So, I, the chief's goal is to hire them as quickly as possible to get them into the academy for February. Right, that would be the ideal scenario.
Okay, great. Thank you. Audience questions? Okay, we've got a few.
Bill, do you mind if people stand up with the mic so that other people that,
I
can't
think
hear?
holding the mic close to your face, even though it's uncomfortable, is the way to go.
With the firefighters, do they also have to be co-trained as EMTs? Number one. And how does that work in relationship to the fire building that we have? The fire station is already too small.
That's an excellent question, and we did ask the chief that with the existing station. While we are still looking at the future of what we need to do with that station, we made sure we discussed with the chief that we still be able to accommodate the 8 new firefighters with what we have, and the chief has assured us that is not a problem. Okay, they will. There's part of this is also to create new space within the station. So that's part of the total amount that is being requested. It's not just the 8 new firefighter salary. Part of it is equipment that needs to go with them and training and all of that. So we made sure we did ask that ahead of time. So thank you.
And
And
yes,
then regarding
no.
I'm not sure on the answer of the EMT training.
That's yes.
Is that what you're?
Yes. So yes, they have to be EMTs because 80% of the calls are EMS calls in the community, which mean for those who don't know, this is basically 2 at a time on an ambulance, really just well, minimum 2. But yes. So yes is the answer.
Okay, I think we had a couple more.
Hi, my name's Susan Quirk. Quick questions. How many FTEs do we currently have firefighters? Full-time full-time. So 20 are on shift, and you came up with 8 based on an analysis. You're going to staff them for the full year at full time, or are you going to flex staff them given how the community changes? So then when winter comes, how would you pull back on that? Right now, how much overtime are you paying? Are you paying a lot? Okay, so that kind of almost funds it. Um, and I guess my other question, this was supposed to be funded by a grant, is that correct?
We had applied for a grant, but we have not received notification that we received it. So at this point, we are assuming that we have not received it.
Okay, so if you can, I mean, it seems like a huge amount of money to a lot of people. However, if you can minimize overtime and get a good crew that's working well as a team and culturally and moves people, etc., um, it's a lot different than just having very tired firefighters out there burned out. So that was my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another, okay.
Bill. Just to follow up on that question, that was a great question. I'm wondering if anybody, Kim or the chief, could comment on the functional numbers that are currently on staff in the firehouse and the how much time we're giving aid to surrounding communities and how much time we're receiving aid. So that the difference in this 8 firefighters, does that get us up to full staff or is the house uncovered at times?
Plus one person. So when there's a second 911 call or a third 911 call in Orleans, that resource is not staffed fully. So if you want the best service, you got to have people there. And we don't always have people there. And that's really the challenge. Right now, when the ambulance goes out and we only have one person back, we page out for coverage. We ask our off-duty firefighters to come in. 91% of the time, no firefighters come in. There are hours upon hours every single day.
In our town, I believe that sewering is the number one priority. And the number two priority should be the construction of new firehouse. And nowhere in these articles do we address the fact that we do not have land to build that firehouse. And if it's going to cost us $3 or $4 million to purchase a piece of land in the central part of town, maybe we should be deferring on selling Bay Ridge, which we might be able to swap. Maybe we should be slowing down some of these other capital things. So I would like a sense, probably from Michael, of how the selectmen prioritize when this need has been out there for 2 and 3 years. I haven't heard anything new about it. We need the new firehouse. As a human resources person, he's going to have a tough time attracting people if he's offering the same pay as another town that has a up-to-date, up-to-code fire department. And I think that's kind of the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in here as a moderator and elephant or not, we are really going to try and stick to the actual warrant for the moment. If we want to talk about Bay Ridge Lane later or something like that, we'll open it up at the end, but we do want to stick to our buckets and the things that are actually on this warrant. And, lest we get totally sidetracked and don't get to the warrant. That is obviously a very important question, so thank you for that.
I mean, there should be time at the end to bring in questions that are not specifically warrant related. Okay, thank you, Emily. So, any other questions? Okay.
Hi. After sitting in so many meetings about lack of affordable housing, how are you going to recruit people? Where are they going to live? And what if you can't recruit people? What happens to the money that we will vote? Assuming that we voted the money in, if you can't recruit.
Good question. Who wants, anyone? Kim? Thank you.
Well, the chief and I spent an hour last week talking about this very issue. It's a difficult hiring market, and the housing market here is not helping by any stretch. And so we know that we have to come up with a creative solution, particularly around public safety and all of the critical needs for the community that involves housing. But that's complicated, particularly when it's can't only be based upon income and it's availability of housing stock. And so it's, we're working on it is the only possible answer to that, which is it's a complicated problem that isn't going to be solved fast, but we have to do something to incentivize hiring here. And I would anticipate that we're putting something together to come back with in May that sort of helps that situation a bit. I mean, it's tricky. I mean, in considering, we have existing staff that have been sort of maybe not directly impacted because they haven't moved lately, but it does affect other members of the department, so we have to really be careful, and make sure we're being as fair as we can possibly be when we incentivize certain things. And so the only answer is we're talking about it and we know it's going to be an issue.
Great. Thank you, Kim. All right. Any other questions? Fire and rescue? Nope. Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Emily, who's going to take on the green bucket.
Okay, so our third bucket, we're calling environmental stewardship. And the articles that, let's see. The articles we're going to talk about, we're going to start with Article 32, which pertains to authorizing $50,000 for treating Pilgrim Lake with alum to address the cyanobacteria bloom that happened this summer. We would love to hear a brief description of the problem, the proposed solution, and what exactly the 50,000 is for, and how much money would the entire treatment cost. So I'll start with that. Which of our panelists would like to take this one?
Happy to, if you want. I could start with it. Alum treatment for Pilgrim Lake has been brought up because this article is strictly about funding. We as a select board have moved this conversation through our regulatory board, the Conservation Commission. They will be handling it from this point forward in regards to permitting, public hearings, all of that. It is a complex process that they have to go through with multi agencies and stakeholders involved. So they're gonna take that. At the same time, when we decided to address this issue, we didn't want to, as you'll see in the Warren article, there's a timeline. We didn't want to sabotage ourselves by not being able to have the funding available for it when and if it comes out of CONSCOM for the next season. So what we've done in this article is make it very clear to the public what our intention is on this article, which is to fund an alum treatment for Pilgrim Lake. And it will be the choice of the town at town meeting whether to fund it or not. And that's where we're at.
Okay, and just a couple follow-up questions with this, and then we'll take questions just on the Pilgrim Lake situation. So, could you talk about, I know there are strong feelings on both sides of this. One question I think might come up, and you might want to just address a little bit, is the risks and benefits of alum treatment, or is this something we want to leave to CONSCOM?
I personally would leave it to CONSCOM. We are not scientists on the select board. I wouldn't want to comment on this, and we have had this discussed at one of our advisory committees, the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee. They are looking into providing informational materials and possibly doing an informational meeting that is being discussed. This came out very rapidly, of course, right at the end of the summer. We worked very quickly as a select board to address this and squeeze this in on the last minute before the Warren closed on September 2nd. But we are not experts in alum, and we wanted to make sure we did the proper follow through and proper procedure by passing this along to the Conservation Commission, who again will have public hearings with experts and stakeholders.
So just to clarify, if this $50,000 is approved, does that mean the alum treatment will happen?
No.
Okay.
No, this is just for being able that if it does get through the regulatory process, that there is money available to do it. That's all this is. This is just a funding mechanism to make sure. We'd hate it to go through the whole regulatory process and then find out we didn't have approval to do what was recommended. So this article is just again about making sure the funds are available if the decision comes through to do an alum treatment. Okay, if the decision does not come through to do an alum treatment, the funds get returned.
Thank you. We can take some questions on that issue if people have them on that article about Pilgrim Lake. Ooh, okay. Oh, you have a question? Yeah, Martha.
Betsy?
Question. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize the point that Michael made, which is that this is a funding mechanism. In the same way that if the fire truck was more money, you had to go back and get the additional money approved. People should understand that in 2021, the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee had an article that specifically identified $40,000 for remediation of freshwater ponds. And it was felt that it needed to be more specifically related to alum. So you are voting for a funding issue. You are looking at science that goes back 20 years. Our citizen scientists have been studying Pilgrim Lake, taking water quality measurements for 20 years. 3 years ago, the University of Massachusetts School of SMAST did a complete study for the sources of the phosphorus and the nutrient overload. So this is not, even though, as Michael explained, it's popped up suddenly in terms of catching the fall meeting. This is decades in the making, in the same way that sewering was decades in the making. And it's really important as a town that we are consistently prioritizing our water quality because we drink the water we stand on. Thank you.
So Kevin Galligan, also a select board member. Great to have this forum. Thank you, both of you, Martha, Emily, for doing this. If folks did watch the select board meeting last evening, at the end under future agenda topics, I was a rascal that suggested if the board would entertain a reconsideration of how the select board voted on this article, because as Michael pointed out, we did have a bloom of cyanobacteria. It's serious, has consequences for the health of our public and pets as well. But I feel we acted a little bit quickly. And I am reconsidering whether I support this for a number of reasons. Not that the health of our water in this water body is not critical. However, when you look at the facts of this water body, it's in an ACEC, it's a great pond. It has a herring run. It contains freshwater mussels that are documented in the 2019 SMAST report that indicates further analysis and mapping is necessary. So I look at this as, and it's been mentioned that all we're doing is sending this to CONSCOM, but anybody that's an applicant to CONSCOM needs to put together all of what CONSCOM requires. So if we are in fact serious about putting a successful project into CONSCOM, we need to do the work. We need to do the mapping. We need to identify what has been identified in the reports as further study required. Because you're going to put CONSCOM, I feel, in this town in a really difficult position, asking questions, and we as the town, as an applicant, should be treated no different than anyone else. So if they want alternatives, if they want analysis, we should be ready to stand up and do that. And I don't feel comfortable with the analysis and the reports that are done to date that we're ready to go. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bob Mullen, Keziahs Lane, also a member of the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee. And my career was spent as a consulting environmental engineer. I believe it's important to note that the studies have been done. Concerns about the mussels are really not warranted because the mussels occur in shallow water. There are 3 deep zones that will be treated by alum, so mussels will not be affected. I think if you can refer to the management plan by SMAS, it's pretty well laid out. The studies have been completed, and the critical aspect is that we had a cyanobacteria outbreak. The probability of getting continued outbreaks, therefore, is much higher. And there's also, as Michael pointed out, a tight timeline to get through CONSCOM and get the regulatory process to do this within a time frame that also allows for the health and continued operation of the herring run. I think the last thing we want to see is another cyano outbreak, as well as, which could result in a major fish kill of what is an increasing population of herring in Pilgrim Lake. So it's really a time-sensitive process that's been fully studied. Thank you.
My name is Judy Scanlon. I'm the Vice Chair of the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee. Can you hear me now? It's right up in my mouth. Okay. Don't want to eat it, but I'm the vice chair now of the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee. I live on 40 Monument Road in Orleans. I've been involved with freshwater pond monitoring in Orleans as a volunteer, but also I'm a marine biologist and by by experience with the town also become very familiar with freshwater pond ecology and everything else. So I have great respect for Kevin, but I do feel that the process that goes through CONSCOM will require the Department of Environmental Protection, Massachusetts approval. They will want to send it to Massachusetts, the National Heritage for any concerns related to species like freshwater mussels. If they require additional information that was not done in an extensive study and an extensive management plan developed by the scientists, their experienced lake managers and limnologists, they will ask for additional information. 14 ponds on Cape Cod have already been treated using alum treatment, successfully treated, including, as a previous speaker mentioned, Uncle Harvey's Pond, which has shown great water quality improvement since that was done in 2021. Um, uh, Ponds that have been done have been located in an ACEC. They have had herring runs. We've had 2 in Chatham, 2 in Eastham. There have been some in Brewster. We have Harwich that's just approved Skinnequit, if I can pronounce it correctly, pond in Harwich to be done, and that also has herring. So I think it's important, as Michael pointed out, that we at least have the funding in place should it be approved later on or look like we need to do it. We can't really risk another cyanobacteria bloom. The likelihood of one occurring does increase now since we've had the very first one in Pilgrim Lake. That's a critical spawning and nursery habitat for our herring. We don't even know how the one we had this summer, which closed the pond for a month, affected the herring fry that were in Pilgrim Lake. So as far as a marine biologist and a lover of herring, and the technical coordinator for our Orleans volunteer herring count, I don't want to take that risk. I really hope that at least the funding can be approved in case we need to use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, it looks like there's one more question right up here.
People 100% to tell them they're gone. There is a new technique out which is here in Orleans at Silver Pond, and basically what he talks to in the world. That we consider that Hallam is a aluminum hydroxide type of product, and many women will remember that aluminum hydroxide is in all under deodorants for many years. I know that you said that it might be linked to breast cancer, and I think so actually. But today, we cannot find the aluminum hydroxide and aluminum hydroxide going because
All right, thank you. We have one more question back here or comment.
Just based on the previous comment, alum is an aluminum sulfate, and sodium aluminate is also used with that. When it's placed in the deepest parts of the pond, it sequesters the phosphorus that is causing the outbreaks. That stays on the bottom, and the benthic environment is restored above that alum that is in place. So there'll be sediment above that that allows for further growth in the environment. Aluminum is not on the list of um, Safe Drinking Water Act maximum contaminant levels as a priority pollutant. So the exposure to alum, one, is very unlikely because of its depth, and two, it will not adversely impact the water quality over a long period of time. It should be, I believe from the reports, it won't show up very long, within maybe a month or two after the treatment. Thank you.
Kevin?
Thanks very much. So just one quick one again. This is expectations, so everybody is learning clearly what is on the warrant, and it's stated right in the warrant. So if there is an appeal, and the reason I say this is because there's a great expectation this will be approved, rush through CONSCOM, get it in by February or March. It's right in the warrant. However, if an appeal is made to DEP, and it's listed right in the warrant, there could be as much as a 26-week delay for them to do their site visit, review all the records, issue their superseding order. So I just want folks to know, approval of this is not a guarantee that this will go in for next season. That's all.
Thank you. And there was one more.
Really just got to speak into the mic.
I'll make it very quick. If you cross the bridge and you drink water on the other side of the bridge, you are drinking water that has been treated with alum. It has been proven safe. It's been used to floccate water since Roman times. It's very effective. In Uncle Harvey's Pond, the results speak for themselves. It cleared up the cyanobacteria blooms. The water is beautiful. The wildlife is returning. We've asked very specifically when dredging was an option if flock from alum would be considered a contaminant in our pond. We were absolutely assured by Dr. Ken Wagner, who wrote State of Massachusetts water management protocols, or the guidelines that you follow, that it is benign, it is not a contaminant, and it would never affect your ability to dredge if chose to dredge in the future. So I think it's really important that everyone look for the informational session, because there's a lot of inaccurate information that gets floated about.
Okay, we should probably wrap that topic up, but is there an informational session planned that anyone knows of that we can direct people to? Not, oh, yes.
Judy Scanlon. I know that the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee is trying to set up an informational Q&A session with some experts that can come in and answer questions. I believe that also it came up last night. I believe the freshwater scientist, water quality scientist, Ed Eichner, who authored, primary author of the management plan for Pilgrim Lake, will be present at town meeting to answer questions as voters have them. There will be, we're also trying to compile some facts and information, because we can tell it's not just today, but there are a lot of questions out there, and we're hoping very much that we can further inform voters so they can then make an informed vote. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving right along here. This may be a straightforward question, but you never know, do you? The next article is Article 29, changes to the sewer fee schedule. And we added this one in because we do get a lot of questions about the sewering and deadlines and fees and things like that. So is this one for Kim or Michael? I don't know, but could you just explain exactly what's being proposed here and
Yeah.
why?
Thank you, Emily. you had me down here to take this one, so I'll answer it. We did discuss this last night at a public hearing. The whole idea behind this is really there's a couple fee changes for what's existing right now. A failure to connect after town order. Currently, the fee is $50 a day, and you may have noticed it. Well, it's jumped up to $250 a day. This is not meant to be in any way onerous to the public. We are just trying to make sure in good faith people are working towards connecting in sewer. When you look at what they've been doing with the double walled fuel tanks, with other things that the town is requiring people to either update or not, they're trying to get people to start the process. We know that it takes a long time with the sewers regarding finding an engineer. It's not easy to find an engineer right now. Sometimes people get the first notice and don't always adhere to that first notice or the second one or maybe even the third one. And what we're really just trying to do is encourage people that this is going to happen. We do need people to connect. And as long as good faith that you're working towards connecting, we've been the committee, the Board of Health, the Board of Water and Sewers have been very accommodating and working with residents. And that's all we're trying to do with this. In regards to the single family home and sewer expansion application, we've actually lowered that considerably from $1,500 to $250. And then the sewer markout fee, which is just the same as what we have currently with the water department. When town employees need to go out to your property and mark where connections should be made, and it's basically, I had to ask this question to find out what a markup fee was, but it's really to go and mark your property. I think if anybody's had work done on their property, there's a company called DigSafe where you generally call them before to show you where utilities are so that your contractor doesn't accidentally hit those utilities, because nobody wants their power to go out or an accident to happen. So this is just a fee for town employees to go out and mark your property of where the connections are. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions on the sewer fee changes? Okay. All right. We'll keep moving then. Thank you, Michael. The next article is Article 30, and this is about the adoption of the Specialized Energy Code. Briefly, this article seeks to replace the Stretch Energy Code adopted in 2018 with a new updated building code, all with the goal of a net zero emissions economy in Massachusetts by 2050. My understanding is it would only apply to new construction permitted after January 1st, 2024. And there are a lot of other certain situations that it will and will not apply to. They are all in the warrant. Constance, I'm going to toss this one to you. I see the FinCom voted 5-1 in favor of the article. Could you tell us a little bit about the thinking there and what, if any, disagreement there was?
Sure. Basically, the finance committee looked, and we were lucky enough to have Roger McDaniel and John, and I believe John is here, yeah, from the Energy and Climate Committee, which is a fairly new committee in town. And they've done a lot of great research. And by bringing this article, we learned that basically Massachusetts legislation in 2021 gave a mandate in Massachusetts to create this step, but we are aware that it's a town decision. So what the Energy and Climate Committee has brought forth is the ask if Orleans is willing to opt in. And what it means is for all new buildings. And because we want and have already established that we will be a green community going forward with our new builds, a lot of this passive housing and passive build is basically, it's going to be a baseline regulation. So what this Stretch Energy Code defines is that anything over 4,000 square feet, new build, must have these regulations basically that are going to move over to electric. Okay, so it's the whole move from fossil fuels. And I think that the one vote, we did vote 6-1, and one of the members of the finance committee wanted to understand why a town would have to subsidize something that um, is going to cost so much less. And I think that once we heard from John and Roger, I'm not sure if that member would change his mind, and I don't want to assume he would, but I think that we were talking about what happens with short-term spending for long-term savings. And passive housing has a long history. My husband happens to be German, and he has lived in a house with no air conditioning. His parents are in their 80s. They both do not have air conditioning, and their houses are super insulated. Not what that means is, and that's what we're hoping for these new builds, is that you're saving on your energy costs because your house can retain coolness in the hot summers and it can also retain heat in a cold winter. And so, one of our new finance committee members, David Abel, who has some experience in this, you know, said it right out of my mouth. He said, "This is really, it's out of the barn, the idea of passive housing, these energy codes, the United States regulatory system, we're just catching up." Basically. And so I think most of the finance committee felt as though this was smart for homeowners, individual homeowners, and multifamily and the affordable housing that we're going to be building. All these new builds needs to really consider mixed fuels and moving away from fossil fuels so that the operating costs of a multifamily or affordable housing community are less. Nothing's worse than always having to look at your operating budget and realize you're not able to afford the costs of higher utilities that we all are experiencing in our own homes. So this does not affect housing that exists, and it's very specific to the 4,000 plus. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, that is helpful. Yeah, let's take some questions on Article 30. The mic's coming to you.
Hold it close to your face.
Hi, I just wanted to follow up with the question on 4,000 square feet level. I'd like to know, you must know how many houses are licensed for construction each year that are less than 4,000 square feet, and those above 4,000 square feet. Somehow 4,000 square feet seems to be the wrong level.
It seems to be the wrong level.
Yes, my house is 1,600 square feet and it has 4 bedrooms.
Yeah.
So there must be quite a few houses being built in Orleans that are less than 4,000 square feet. Why don't we have a lower square foot?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think somebody better than myself could answer that question in the audience. I do know the number of new houses that have been built larger than 4,000 square feet in town. But yeah, maybe you could speak to it.
David Jacobson on the Energy Committee also. I mean, houses below 4,000 square feet also have to meet a very stringent new code that went into effect January 1st of this year. The stretch code you were referring to automatically got an update. There was an original one, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and then January 1st, 2023, that got bumped up for everybody. So all the houses below 4,000 square feet also have to be very, very efficient. This is just a special add-on. That's why it's called the specialized code. So it's an added, and I guess it might have been thought that the bigger houses have a bigger impact on the environment. But believe me, the below 4,000 square foot houses are not left out. They still have to be extremely efficient. Um, it's a complicated question. The code has subsections and all that. The Energy Committee has produced a Q&A that goes through and has the exact requirements for below 4,000 square feet and above 4,000 square feet. Roger McDaniel put that together. So we could get you a copy of that. I don't know how we could make that available.
So the question was, where do you find that information about the codes?
That was my question also. I've seen this information and that question comes up all the time when people are asking. So somewhere in the explanation of I'm not against I'm not against it, but somewhere in your story it's unclear what happens under 4,000 square feet. And it's nice to know that there's something already been done, but this is the first time we've actually heard about that. And that seems like an answer, it's a question in search of an answer. So I'm just saying that this has come up more than once in several different committees that I've been on and listened to. You need that piece of where that, if it's already in the books, that it needs to be clarified what below 4,000 square feet.
Just to clarify, most of the work for houses below 4,000 square feet, any kind of energy code already got passed and is already included in the code. Yes. And above, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to, John Londa, I'm the chair of the Energy Committee. I'd like to just clarify. So this code is going to affect residential and commercial, and it tends to encourage people to put in all electric homes or all electric commercial buildings. It does allow for you to put in gas equipment. When you do that, however, it adds additional requirements. What are those additional requirements? So let's say we were building a house and we wanted to put in a gas range. Reasonable thing to do, but if you do go with gas and don't stay all electric, you're going to end up adding 4 kilowatts of solar. That's 12 solar panels. So there are requirements if you don't go all electric, and that's kind of where the under 4,000 comes in. If you're under 4,000, you build to the same level of efficiency as the stretch code we're currently under.
Thank you.
Okay, we should probably wrap this up and move on to our last environmental stewardship article, which is Article 24. And this is a home rule petition for the state regarding pesticide reduction in Orleans. The article is asking for voter authorization to ask the state for permission to write our own bylaw regarding pesticide reduction. It's not a ban, but a reduction in my understanding. And I guess there's been a lot of conversation about this in town, I know already. One question I had for Michael was, first of all, what pesticides would be allowed under these new restrictions and who would it apply to? Homeowners, landscapers, stores selling the stuff. So we've got about 5 minutes I guess 5 minutes to really talk about it. But if you could give us some quick bullet points on that, that would be great.
Sure. Want to take this, Kim? No. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Wait, were you going to let me?
Yeah. Jump right in. So we've had a lot of conversation about this, of course, over the last year. The select board in June 15th of 2022 made a commitment to the town after a lot of public response to the select board of the overuse in their feelings of pesticides in our environment. So we've put together a home rule petition because I think everybody understands that this is a preemptive state law where we can't just make our own decisions regarding what chemicals go in the ground. That right was taken away from us as a town by the state, and now we have to petition the state to get that right back. There are 86,000 chemicals in our environment. So to put together a list of what you can do, it's rather challenging. One thing we've really not focused on is kind of listing brands and different things like that. For what people need to understand, again, this is not a ban on pesticides. we are trying to reduce the most toxic pesticides in our environment. There are allowable lists that are attached to the warrant article that are on our website of pesticides that are at minimal risk pesticides, which these are lists not from us. These are from the Department of Agriculture and the Environmental Protection Agency. So those will still be allowed to be used. In regards to just simply any natural pesticide that's on the market is still allowed to be used. What we're really doing is stopping the synthetic pesticides. So anything natural which are available at your landscapers right now can be continued to be used. Nothing changes. Nothing changes with our retailers being allowed to sell. They're still continue to sell anything that's on their shelves right now. So we're not trying to stop trade in any way. There is an exception list in the home rule petition of things like anything you currently use indoors, inside your house, you can continue to use. So those are a lot of those are pesticides. So those aren't banned. Anything you use, people ask some questions have been for personal protection and worried about maybe mosquitoes or ticks. Again, whatever you currently use for personal protection, you can still use even once this is passed. Anything you use to protect your pets, you can still use once this is passed. So we've really tried to work with organizations and meet in the middle here. I think you'll see with the handout that we've passed out, we have support from the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, the Orleans Pond Coalition, the Orleans Conservation Trust, the Orleans Conservation Commission, and it goes on and on and on. And all of them have voiced some concerns of different things as we were putting together this warrant article. We've listened as a select board and we've made adjustments throughout the process. We've had several informational meetings and it's been discussed numerous times and voted on unanimously by the select board 3 different times to move this article forward. And we are very welcome, even at this stage, to discuss it here. And if there are any further questions, I know time is short, but you can reach out to us at all time and discuss with us. One thing, I see Rick Francolini in the audience there. We have at the Orleans Farmers Market also for 4 hours every Sunday for the last 7 Sundays, except for when we had the hurricane. Saturday, I apologize. I should know that because I have my booth there. But every Saturday we have had volunteers there to answer questions and discuss this. So any information, educational materials, we are more than happy to provide. This can be a complex issue when you first start looking at it, but really as it becomes simpler, when you really understand all we're trying to do is to protect our environment and protect our people in looking at reducing the most harmful toxic pesticides. It is not easy to put together these bylaws. Home rule petitions, they take years in the making in regards to once this passes at town meeting, it will go to the state, be sponsored like our fertilizer was by Representative Pete most likely, and then it becomes a bill. And then it has to get passed in the House, the Senate, after committee and then signed by the governor before it ever comes back to Orleans. So we've got years to work on this together.
Michael, I want to just jump in. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just want to make sure we have time to hear from Constance and also I didn't ask her yet. So, but also we want to take general questions after this from about any articles. But I just did note that the finance committee voted it was a tied vote for and against this article. Is that correct? 3-3. So could
It
you
was
just tell us?
3-3-1. It was a
An abstain.
3-4, 3 against and 1 abstain.
So could you just as briefly as possible explain that for us? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm only one person of 9 people on the finance committee. So we all have our own personal views about what is acceptable for town to dictate. One person is a lawyer, so of course he's thinking of the personal liabilities or the rights of an individual to use something or not on their property. Others, including myself, feel as though this goes hand in hand with our strategic uh, planning for sewer and water treatment. I mean, if we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars to get our sewers pulled back and phased out of our water bodies, which we've taken much time talking about this evening, then we have to consider what pesticides and fertilizers do when they run down into our water bodies. So this is a lot of these are interconnected as far as I was concerned. And the upstage, I can't
Yeah,
I
you
can't speak to that, but
Okay, well, thank you. That's helpful. Let's see if we can take a few questions from the audience on the pesticide reduction. If is anyone interested in asking a question or sure.
Right. The real issue is whether or not the Commonwealth will go for it. So that's the real issue. So pesticides and debating back and forth and all that, yes, it would be in the best interest, I'm sure. That would be my personal opinion. But what then you're into your lobbying strategy, and then you are into getting it through the House, the Senate, and to the governor's desk. So this is something you would not see for years. You're right, absolutely. So right now, are we just deciding as a town if you even care enough to put it up to go to Senate? Okay,
That's all this is. This
that's
is
all this
just
is.
moving. This is the first step in a long process, but it moves it forward to the state. It
Okay,
first needs town approval.
okay. Thank you.
I'm getting there.
I think Lynn was next.
Who's Lynn?
Lynn.
So I have a question just about, I did go looking to see what the bylaws are. So in May of 1981, the bylaw on herbicides and the violations and penalties, $200. And then we have another bylaw that's wetlands protection in May of 87. And then another bylaw, which is also about herbicides in the wetlands in May of 13. So my question is, we have some of these bylaws that the town voted for because the town votes for bylaws, right? We don't vote for select board policies because there is a select board policy that's about using pesticides and herbicides on town property. That's just a town policy, so that doesn't apply, and it's just on town property. So Michael, what's our history of enforcing any of this? And what fines have we collected? And who has actually, over the last, since 1981, do the math, 19 plus 23. So that's so we could perhaps retire some debt if we've done this $200 for every, um, who actually is going to,
Yeah, that's not been,
we have
I
never
think,
enforced, ever? Have we
I
ever?
do not know back in 1981 or 82, Lynn, whether we did enforce. I know in recent history, we have not been enforcing.
We have never enforced any of the bylaws that we,
And we hope at this stage we will. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Sure. One more question on this and then we'll move on.
Last question. Given this new feedback on what's enforceable, what's not, when everything's been enforced, what are the who are the big targets for this process once I'm in favor of it, but who would be the folks who would be most affected negatively if we can't keep this? I assume it's the big.
It would be, and not so much landscaping, but chemical company that spray. A lot of landscapers use chemical companies and subcontract the work out that come into our community and spray. I think you see the big trucks. There is regulations and there is enforcement at the state level. All landscapers or people who apply chemicals are licensed by the state. So we're hoping that there is a significant reduction in that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And at this point, we're just going to open it up to any other questions that anyone has about articles that we did not manage to cover. We got about 10 minutes left, so. Uh,
Just keep it close to your face.
Um, this has been touched on, but I feel very strongly about some of the things that have been said, particularly the first two issues that we're talking about, because the thing is that we are having an affordable housing issue here in town, and you're bringing in new people. And one of the things that is concerning and has a history is people come in, they accept a job, they realize they can't find some place to, to, to live, and so they leave. And it's going to happen, hopefully that we can address it so that they won't feel that they don't have a place to live.
Agree 100%. I don't think that it has a direct question to the warrant, so we can just let it sit for now. But it does sound like Kim also, the answer was we're working on it, right? As we all know, we're working on it.
One of the articles, actually, the one about reorganization, one of the
Yep.
things I'm going to look at in that article is this particular issue. You know, what does hiring look like here for the next 10 years, right, in this window? Because we are in a unique location, right? We are in a very particular situation because your critical infrastructure, like your public safety, right, is tied to your community, and you cannot allow that to fail. And so we have to sort of think about staffing maybe a little bit differently than other companies do, because your town functions off certain positions existing, and we have to make sure that happens no matter what that means. We need to figure that out before it actually happens. You know, we're too late.
Just a comment that there really is no such thing as affordable housing in Orleans, and there never will be. The only possibility is subsidized housing. I mean, I'm currently building a project in Harwich, and you can go through hundreds of thousands of dollars in a real hurry. And for example, the new insulation requirements that go into effect on 1st of January, because my building permit was before that, it doesn't apply, even though I wholeheartedly agree with it, and anything I build, I super insulate. But that's a few more $1,000s that added to the cost of each housing unit you build. Every regulation adds. And with the price of labor, with the price of materials, you can't build an affordable unit. You just cannot build it. If you want to, a private individual to cover the cost of that investment in that land and that materials, you have to charge a certain rent or you don't do it. And that's the reality of the situation. You either subsidize it or you don't have it, particularly in Orleans. You know, some town in the middle of Massachusetts somewhere, you could build something affordable, but with the regulations that exist now, you cannot do it in Orleans. Thanks.
Can I just speak to that? Thank you for that question. And you're absolutely right. I mean, on the finance committee, we discuss quite often, what is affordable housing and is it really affordable? But when you're taking some of the numbers away, we're talking about a community's vitality. And sometimes affordable isn't about the numbers. Yes, square foot per square foot, the amount that you have to pay upfront for these housing units, divided by the amount of units you can have on a certain amount of parcel, um, really is skyrocketing. So the other flip side of that is a department like the water department doesn't have positions filled. This goes back to succession, or the fire department. We don't have people in the fire department. It's critical need. So we know we're going to get shovels in the ground for 107 Main Street. We're making progress. Penrose is getting through their process. Governor Prince has been conveyed since May, right? The developers coming up with RFP, I believe.
The RFP process is on the street right now.
So I feel really optimistic. Yes, it's expensive, but just like the stretch energy code, it's the upfront costs that then establish, best practices for a growing community. We need the workforce here. We want to keep people that are already here living here, and we want to attract families and individuals to our town. And in order to do that, it has to be, hand in hand with all of these things. So I think we have to say the investment's worth it.
Yeah, should we take one last question, Maxine, or do we need to wrap it up? Okay, one last question if we've got one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm not sure we have enough time for
got-
fire station.
you can speed talk it. It's you've
Not
got
related to
about
the warrant.
2 minutes. But
Well, she asked the question, so maybe somebody on the
yeah.
It's not being ignored. It is being addressed, Betsy. We don't have an exact plan right now. The fire department has, of course, we've looked at other locations. They would like to remain in the location or nearby the location they're at. That has proved challenging, that it takes a little bit longer time to work through with other entities that are around those properties. There aren't vacant properties that we can just find and build. So we might not have it on this warrant article, but it is not forgotten about at this town. It is one of our select board goals. And I see Miss Andrea Reed shaking her head back there, that one of the goals we put on there was to solve the fire station situation by the end of this fiscal year. Whether we're able to do that or not, we'll see. But it is definitely top of mind of us at the select board in working with those entities to try and find a solution. We have, at least on my short 2 years being involved with the board, everything that the fire department, this town has been extremely generous in all of the equipment. I hope it will be generous with the staffing that we go to this town meeting. So we're trying to do everything we possibly can. But a capital project like that, we have to have the land. And we are working on it. That's all I can really tell you in detail.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. What the public can't see and the select board has been addressing is that when we talk about real estate purchases or we talk about plans with the school district, those are confidential conversations. And so just because you haven't heard anything doesn't mean there hasn't been movement on them. The other thing is, as a community, we are uncomfortable using eminent domain because there's been a call for that in the past. Well, just take the property. We need a new fire station. That should exceed all other goals. But we don't like to do that. That puts neighbor against neighbor, and it does a civil war. So please be assured that this select board has been reaching out very quietly to property owners all over town, and publicly you've seen the results of those location studies. So just because you haven't heard anything doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of work going on. That's all.
Thank you, Andrea. I wanted to thank Constance, Michael, and Kim for this great discussion, and for the audience for being here for this really lively, informative night, and to OCF, Orleans Citizens Forum, for helping to bring some light to the darkness of the warrant, which is hard to understand for some, even me, even though I've been reading them for years now. So thank you all for being here, and I hope to see you at town meeting.